Good day, everyone. The program will begin shortly. Good day. Welcome to Advocacy Anywhere, powered by AJC. Advocacy Anywhere is AJC's digital platform that will enable you to engage with AJC's global expertise, content, and advocacy from wherever you are. Today's program is brought to you in partnership with Jewish Insider. You can sign up for Jewish Insider's daily kickoff by visiting www.jewishinsider.com. We are honored to be joined today by His Excellency Taranjit Singh Sandhu, Indian Ambassador to the United States. The Ambassador will be in conversation with AJC Chief Policy and Political Affairs Officer, Jason Isaacson. After we hear from Ambassador Sandhu, we will take your questions. You may email your question to questions@ajc.org. That's questions, plural. Jason, Ambassador, you have the floor.
Daniel, thank you very much. And Ambassador, it's good to be with you again. We were on FaceTime a couple of weeks ago, one-on-one. We're now using Zoom. Maybe next week we'll try Google, then we'll try Microsoft. At some point, I hope we're back together again in person. I always very much enjoy our conversations, and we've been doing this for many years. You served previously as First Secretary at the Indian Embassy in Washington. You served as the Chief of Mission, and of course now since February, you've been the Ambassador. As you know, Ambassador, AJC has a long relationship with your country. We have visited over the last 25 years on numerous occasions. We've been fortunate enough to have meetings with the successive prime ministers. When Prime Minister Modi made his historic visit to Israel in July of 2017, AJC was there. And when Prime Minister Netanyahu paid a reciprocal visit to New Delhi in January of 2018, we were there as well. We work closely with the Indian American community on matters of mutual interest. We want to talk about that a little bit with you. But AJC, as you know, is a real friend of India and a real friend of and supporter of, and I would say explainer of, in some ways, the depth and the importance of the relationship between India and the United States and India and Israel. We want to talk about these relationships. We want to really begin by talking a little bit about the coronavirus and how it's affecting India. So I wonder if I could ask you for just some brief opening remarks on how India is dealing with this pandemic, and a little bit more on the relationship between the United States and India and between Israel and India. Ambassador, again, thank you for being with AJC today.
Good afternoon, Shalom. Thank you, Jason, for the introduction and for having me on this platform. It is a pleasure to be speaking to the leadership of AJC and your members. Over the years, we have had a close relationship with AJC. Our embassy and consulates have been celebrating Hanukkah every year in association with your organization. I have known many of you personally, including Shira, Alan, and the young Nissim, and look forward to meeting all of you in person soon. However, in the meantime, in these extraordinary times as we see, we are forced to adapt to the virtual world. As you know, India and United States are global strategic partners with a multifaceted relationship which encompasses almost every aspect of human endeavor. Our defense and energy partnership has grown over the years, as has our scientific collaboration. As democracies with shared values and global strategic partners, we are in a unique position today to work together to combat the COVID-19 crisis. The strong bonds between India and United States are reinforced by our people-centric relationship. The warmth of the Indian people for United States was manifested in the reception that President Trump received in India during the visit in February this year. It is the same people-centric relationship which is the foundation for our relationship with Israel. The close partnership of Indian and Jewish communities in the United States reinforces our relationship with Israel. Both communities share a deep sense of cultural affinity and friendship, which has helped to advance India-Israel-US partnership. It is people like you and other friends who contribute to our foreign policy and enrich our relationship with United States and Israel. India, as you know, has an ancient Jewish tradition. We meet 2 days after Yom HaShoah and remember the victims of the Holocaust. India has always offered refuge to persecuted Jews through the course of history, including during the Holocaust. Our openness and compassion embodied in our philosophy of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which translates as the world is one family, has brought our communities closer. Our bilateral relationship with Israel has seen a rapid advancement in recent years. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Israel in 2017 was the first ever visit by an Indian Prime Minister, which was followed by a visit by the Prime Minister Netanyahu to India in January of 2018. Even as our leaders interact, it is the sea of professionals, businessmen and women, scientists, teachers, doctors, and even tourists that bring our countries closer together. As knowledge economies, we are technology partners. Of course, agriculture and defense have been the pillars of our bilateral engagement with Israel. We are both ancient civilizations, but also startup nations. As we battle this pandemic, India remains engaged with other countries, including United States and Israel, in an effort to partner towards a coordinated response. Our leadership is in close contact, ready to step forward to help our friends. Whether it is the form of ensuing supply of essential medicines or sharing expertise and know-how or joint scientific collaborations, India stands ready to battle this pandemic shoulder to shoulder with our friends. As a country of 1.3 billion people, India faces unique challenges in combating this common enemy. With over 20,000 confirmed cases as of date, we have managed to slow the initial spread of the virus since the first confirmed case in the country on 30th January 2020. Saving lives is our priority, and we have taken preemptive measures under the leadership of our Prime Minister to enforce a total lockdown which has been extended till 3rd May. This has yielded results and slowed the doubling rate of the viruses to 7.1 days from an earlier 3.4 days in mid-March. In the meanwhile, we have ramped up our production of PPEs, life-saving drugs, ventilators. We have enhanced our testing abilities, bringing in a network of private and government laboratories. We are looking to upgrade our medical infrastructure, increase the number of isolation wards, further train our healthcare professionals. Our scientific institutions and companies are working on a war footing on diagnostics and therapeutics. To lessen the hardship of the most vulnerable affected by the lockdown, the government has announced a package of $22.6 billion for the migrant workers who can't go back home at this time. Our central and state governments have set up over 28,000 relief camps. Food camps are ensuring that almost 7.5 million do not go hungry. This is a national effort, and all agencies of the government and provinces, civil society institutions, and the people are together in fighting the coronavirus. I will be happy to discuss India's response in greater detail during the Q&A. I also want to reiterate that we are standing together with partners and friends like United States and Israel, and believe that our collective efforts will help us to overcome the crisis.
Ambassador, thank you for that overview. You're in the second week, as you're saying, of this these three-week lockdowns set to expire, I believe, on May 3rd, according to the Prime Minister. And you've talked a little bit about the efforts that are being taken to mitigate the effects of that lockdown on the public. Surely there must be great challenges that the country is facing. Are you also seeing, as we are seeing in our country, voices being raised about breaking the lockdown, about going back to work? Are you getting the same kind of public reaction that we have here in the United States? And how are farmers, how are small business people coping with what must be extremely challenging circumstances?
Absolutely, you do have a point, but as I mentioned to you, that this was a unique exercise and our leadership took it up on itself. Prime Minister Modi himself led the effort. Our approach was very clear that we had to focus on mitigating measures. And therefore, right in the beginning, in preparation of the lockdown, the Prime Minister took the initiative in doing what was called a Janta curfew, which was a voluntary lockdown of 1 day. And that prepared the people. Thereafter, a very active information campaign, again led by the Prime Minister, involving both the state as well as our federal governments, local bodies, NGOs, basically to be able to explain to the people that why it is so important to participate actively and to follow the lockdown. And so far, I am very happy to report that the state governments, under the leadership of the federal government, have come together. All the political parties have come together. Yes, you are right, because it's impacting the economic life. So obviously there is anxiety. There is desire to start the economic activities back. But the government is going about it in a very systematic way, doing wide consultations. And finally, after discussing with, in fact, the Prime Minister is shortly going to have another video interaction with all the chief ministers, and thereafter take a call of how we will go into phased opening. In fact, some of the activities have already been opened up, particularly focused on some of the essential goods which were required, medicines, medical assistance, etc., and especially some of the supply chains in which we have been helping out. So far, it has been a collective effort, and the fact that we have managed it now 3 weeks, we are confident that the Prime Minister's initiative, which has so far very wide support amongst the people, would carry us through this problem.
Yeah, but the fact that the Indian medical device industry, the pharmaceutical industry continue to operate is essential not only to India, but to the world. The world has come to rely on these devices and protective equipment and pharmaceuticals from India. So thank you for that. We've also been seeing, of course, stories about individual Indians and communities and villages enforcing this lockdown alongside police and other authorities to make sure that the country stays safe. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the impact on travel to and from India for Indian Americans, for Indians. There have been people stranded on the wrong side of such lockdowns. And of course, there are millions of Indian Americans who have family and business connections and other reasons why they would need to go back and forth. And maybe you just saw, there was a story I saw in this morning's New York Times about a woman whose family is in Seattle and they're working in the Silicon Valley kind of a high-tech industry in the Seattle area, and she's stuck in India while her family is back home. This must be happening on so many occasions, so many instances. How is the embassy of India in Washington dealing with all of that?
Jason, it's true that this has had an impact on families. In fact, all of you are seeing it every day. This is an completely unprecedented situation. Nobody had visualized that this kind of a scenario will come. But when it came, all the governments had to immediately focus. So in our case, I think on 11th, the WHO declared it as a pandemic, and we sent out advisories across the board on different platforms, including the direct messaging. We set up a 24/7 helpline, and we helped between 11th and 22nd to get all the emergency cases who wanted to go, including all the consulates and the embassy, especially the consulate in San Francisco, which was already getting into a lockdown condition, and in New York. They functioned right up till 22nd. We gave emergency visas. We tried to send the people through. But today, the situation is very different. There are two aspects which have to be kept in mind, and I think all the authorities, especially the medical authorities, are repeating it again and again. Those are, one, keep safe distance, and second, do not travel, because both these are platforms through which you can pick up and you can pass on. So it's not just yourself. You also have to bother about your family, about the community, about the people at large. And on our side, please keep in mind that despite having 1.3 billion people, our numbers are very contained. Therefore, it's a huge challenge. And we have to implement this very strictly. There have been cases here where deaths have taken place. Our heart goes out. But at this time, we have to be very, very focused on this. We are very hopeful that soon enough, things will improve and travel will start. I would only through your platform request all the people who are facing these problems, our deepest apologies. We ourselves, our families, everybody is here. We are focused, we are working 24/7, but we also require indulgence of the people at this time. Hopefully, in a short while, things will improve and we should be able to restore the traffic.
Now, Ambassador, I think I kind of conflated the issues of travel restrictions, air travel being shut off basically for weeks and weeks, and the issue of immigration. You saw the order by the executive order by the president that was announced a couple of days ago that will have an effect on Indian green card applicants. And of the hundreds of thousands of immigrants in the United States who are waiting for green cards, it's been reported the majority of them are Indians. How is that affecting this very important part of the Indian American community and the relationship between our countries?
Jason, at the moment, the focus is on the medical issue. I think first and foremost, we have to bide over this medical emergency. And subsequently, all these other issues will also come. We are still studying the order because what exact implications it will have. And it's also at the moment for a temporary period, which is 60 days. So as it is, the travel is not too much at this time, but I think this needs a deeper study. And my own firm belief is that wherever the talent is there and wherever, and you keep in mind that a lot of Indian students, there are a large number of Indian students here. Most of them are in the STEM areas. The Indians here bring value to the companies, to the American economy. And I have great confidence that the United States will keep that in mind when final decision is taken on this.
Certainly hope so, and we will do what we can to emphasize that point as well. As you know, we are great believers in prudent immigration policies, feeling that they contribute to the being of our country.
And we have also been bringing it to the attention of the US government at different levels. My minister has been speaking to Secretary of State, and we are at the embassy level. Foreign Secretary Shringla is speaking to Deputy Secretary of State. So we are taking it up. But as I told you, that this will actually come to this thing once the situation normalizes. And I am hopeful that the kind of immigrants who are here and the kind of H-1B visa stakeholders are here, they bring value to the US economy. And I'm sure that will be taken into account.
Absolutely. Ambassador, let me turn to the question of foreign policy and the impact of the coronavirus on relations between and concerns that India has regarding its neighbors. There's a huge surge, as you know, of cases in Iran, and India and Iran have a historic relationship, although it's been restricted significantly in recent years as India has adhered to US sanctions against Iran and for other reasons as well. But I wonder if you can talk about whether this has affected your relations or concerns about tensions across the various borders of India.
Jason, India has had a tradition of taking the lead whenever any crisis touches our region. Prime Minister Modi's neighborhood first policy had actually seen on a number of occasions, in fact, in Sri Lanka when the floods had come, in Nepal when the earthquake came. This time around too, the Prime Minister took the lead. He called for a virtual SAARC meeting. This was attended by all the SAARC countries. India took the lead. Prime Minister announced a SAARC fund to combat the virus, in which we made the first significant contribution. Others have also come in. In addition, we have taken the initiative in sending medicines and even food requirements wherever required to most of our neighbor countries which have needed those. And that has all been completed. In addition, our experts, our health experts, are in regular contact through video conferencing and other media tools to actually train on neighborhood doctors and health workers, given our expertise in this time. So, as I mentioned to you, that we continue to follow our neighborhood first policy and we continue to help our neighborhood. But as far as the problems are concerned, all the countries need to focus at this time combating this virus. But there are some who would always be making use of the opportunity. As much as it is unfortunate, our border guards are ready. If there is any kind of a challenge, we'll take care of that. But that will not detract us from focusing on this particular medical emergency, in which not only the Indian leadership is assuming the initiative on not only regional platforms, but also international platforms like G20, but also the Indian doctors and also the Indian Americans here. As you know, the Indian American health workers, doctors are in the forefront. So therefore, I'm confident that we will continue to take care of our responsibilities in the region, and we will help the entire region to combat this problem and share our experiences, our medicines, our food, whatever supplies we can help them with.
Indeed. Ambassador, I should have said right at the front of our conversation how deeply in debt the United States is to the Indian healthcare workers who are such an important part of the health system of our country. And in mentioning, as you just did, the aid that India has given to neighboring countries in fighting the coronavirus, I should point out, of course, that a shipment of Indian medical equipment, including pharmaceuticals, was sent to Israel not long ago as a result of a conversation between the Prime Minister of Israel and the Prime Minister of India. I think with this, let me ask Daniel to draw on the questions that are coming in from those who are watching this conversation. Daniel?
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Ambassador. As a reminder, you may email your questions to questions@ajc.org. That's questions, plural. This question comes from Jeremy in Washington, D.C. To what degree have intercommunal tensions in India, which were very much in the news a few months ago, been affected, either diminished or exacerbated by the pandemic and the overarching national mission to confront it? In this context, can you please explain the Prime Minister's recent tweet that, quote, COVID-19 does not see race, religion, color, caste, creed, language, or borders before striking. Our response and conduct thereafter should attach primacy to unity and brotherhood. We are in this together.
Absolutely. I think my Prime Minister has very clearly echoed what is the Indian sentiment on this. And India has been very clearly focused on handling this, as I said, health emergency. Irrespective of any of these things, India is as you know, it's a country of 1.3 billion people. In the present age of where sometimes misinformation and disinformation is passed around, I can tell you with confidence that, as you can see, that the lockdown is being respected across the board. In fact, when we brought back our citizens from many of the countries between 11th to 22nd, we brought from everywhere, irrespective of religion or anything. All communities are important members of the Indian society and polity. And as my Prime Minister has very clearly articulated, the focus is on preventing this pandemic, and our efforts are very clear. Look, we need to be very frank, in any democratic polity, there will always be challenges. There is no denying of that. But these challenges cannot be over-exaggerated and brought into the main line. Because please keep in mind, there is, as I keep repeating, look at the number of population and look at the size of the minorities. Absolutely, the fight against this particular medical emergency is proceeding online. It's combination of people's efforts, of state government's efforts, as I mentioned to you, and the federal government's effort. And I think one can be very proud. And my request to all of you will be that focus on what the reality is, not what a few people bring out sensational story and plant through the social media. I think the situation is very much, India is one, India is together, and together we are fighting this pandemic.
Thank you, Ambassador. Daniel, other questions?
Yep. Our next question comes from Helen in New York. What is your assessment of the effectiveness of international organizations in battling the pandemic and its aftermath? Has the World Health Organization played a positive or negative role in India's response? Have the World Bank and IMF offered assistance?
I think I would not go into specifics of organizations, but as I mentioned to you earlier, that our effort is to work together, and all the international organizations, the international committee, have to come together, because this knows no borders. As we know, it has spread across borders. And therefore, cooperation of everyone is needed in this. We are also working together with WHO on a number of issues. So again, the focus of Government of India at this time is to fight this pandemic in cooperation with all international partners and friends, including United States and Israel.
Daniel, before I ask you to bring up another question, let me pose a slightly out of the box question to the Ambassador, because all of us at this bizarre, surreal time, very challenging time, have been kind of looking ahead a few months, looking ahead even years, and how the world will be shaped by the pandemic and the economic fallout of the pandemic, and people's thinking about how to function in society, how to work, how to live. And I wonder to what extent you can kind of sit back in your chair and think a little bit with us about the way that India will be changed by this pandemic.
I think world over, changes will be incorporated in simple things and in complicated things. You know, economic life certainly will change. Already some of the policies the Prime Minister had already put in operation. For example, the digitization. That is going to be a massive platform which is going to come even more and more forward. we were already moving towards that. So also the interactions with each other, with international interactions, while in one sense, travel may be impacted for some time, on another sense, because of technology, we will come even closer. Therefore, on the click of the mouse, we'll be able to get to each other, discuss things. The focus has brought in, just like today, we are, despite all these challenges, we are having these discussions. And you can imagine the interactions will be much more. This will become, especially in India, a much more accepted methodology. So I would see a lot of positivity. Then on some of the economic activities, I think all the countries are going to relook in how to work out the supply chains, how to do the interdependence and reliability. And I think in that, India is uniquely placed. We have a good relationship all around. And I do feel that this will help to further deepen our industrial base and bring up our productivity in the long term.
Yeah, I'm expecting even an intensification of the high-tech cooperation between India and other high-tech societies around the world. It is easier and easier and easier to collaborate in this virtual space than perhaps was possible before. Daniel, the next question.
This question comes from AJC board member Bob Pekar in New Jersey. He asks, on March 25th, the Prime Minister announced a 21-day lockdown to contain the spread of the virus that had the seemingly unanticipated result of stranding millions of migrant workers in cities without means of supporting themselves. How is the government providing assistance to low-income Indians who are left destitute by the lockdown?
Absolutely. As I have mentioned that this was an unprecedented situation, and it was a developing, and it is still a developing and an evolving situation. So at that time, this lockdown had to be done. And today, when people are assessing it, there are so many compliments which come, which say that the government of India did a very swift decision and undertook these quick actions. So that was one part of it. Again, that's another example of the successful working of Indian federalism. Today, we have more than 28,000 relief camps. It is housing millions of laborers, and more than 8 million, as I mentioned in my speech, are being provided with food and shelter. It's a combined activity which is being coordinated by the federal government, but the state governments are also involved. And we have been able to take care, as of now, of this problem. And once the economic activities resume, these workers will again be able to find their jobs. But nevertheless, at this time, they are being taken care of, they are being fed, they are being housed.
Daniel?
Thank you. Our next question comes from Maria in San Francisco. She asks, millions of Indians live and work in the Arabian Gulf countries, and their remittances are an important source of income for many families back home. With the economies of those countries badly affected by the pandemic, as well as the plunge in oil prices, what's the impact on Indian expatriates?
Look, as we initially discussed, that this is going to have an economic impact. I think the depth of that still has to be measured, because depending upon how long this continues and how deep it will have, that's when the real impact of this will come through. But you are right, certainly. Our economic planners are already taking that into account. We have given initial relief right now, but finally, it's still too early to come to a conclusion on how much impact this will have and how many workers will have to come back and how many will still continue to work there. Because do keep in mind, Indian expats and Indian workers are one of the best performers in the world. And as and when the economic activity resumes, it is most likely that most of the owners, most of the producers would like to have them back working with them.
Yeah, but my guess is that's true, that that there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Indian workers in the hospitality industry and the Gulf, and in construction, of course, and in home health care and a whole variety of fields. And I would guess that with restaurants closed down and hotels empty, it's going to be a real strain. Daniel, next question.
Yes, this comes from Philip in London. The warm relationship between Modi and Netanyahu has been nothing less than miraculous. To what extent do relationships like that matter in a time of crisis?
I think, as I mentioned, our leadership has a very warm relationship, and even people to people between Israel and India. It's a historical relationship, and it has a lot of current roots. And therefore, this relationship will continue to prosper, and especially in many of the high-tech areas. And as the economy further evolves, I think Israel and India will be important partners along with the United States and many other countries. And the relationship between our leadership has certainly been instrumental in bringing even more warmth and more togetherness. So that would continue, and hopefully, as I mentioned there, all three countries are working together. And one area we are also working together is research, medical research. That is going to be very important in coming days.
Ambassador, I have a question for you before Daniel comes back on. How do you expect the pandemic to change diplomacy? You've been posted to Washington now. This is your third time. You've served in Germany. Of course, you've been back home in Delhi in the External Affairs Ministry. Do you see diplomacy changing going forward with fewer face-to-face discussions, with fewer conferences? We don't know what the UN General Assembly is going to look like in September, if there will be a physical UN General Assembly. How do you see that evolving?
I certainly agree with you that it's a new challenge. But again, to the extent it will impact, it's a bit early right now. Certainly, challenges always provide opportunities. And as we discussed in other cases, through this high tech, we would be in position where many of the discussions, many of the negotiations could be carried out through these means. And I'm sure with innovation and more technology focus, more and more will also become secure, because I think security is also one important aspect in not only commercial negotiations, but a lot of other negotiations. But in one sense, it will also bring the world together. On the click of the mouse, we can have discussions irrespective of the time zones, and a lot of travel, a lot of expenditure may be cut. But ultimately, how much impact it has, it's still to be seen. I think we need to hold our breath and see where it goes, because also keep in mind, there are very, very steep advances being done in the terms of medical research. And there's a lot of hope coming from that side too. We keep reading of such stories from different quarters in the United States itself, on the medicines, on the injections, on vaccines, so much of. So we really don't know by end of the year, once the vaccine is there, how much of things will be back to normal. So one should always keep the hope up.
I love that phrase, back to normal, Ambassador. Thank you. Daniel, next question.
Sure, we have a few more questions. Our next question comes from Julia in New York. She asked, India has a historic relationship with Iran, but strains have appeared in recent months, particularly over India's compliance with US sanctions against Iran and Iranian leaders' vociferous protests over Indian policy in Kashmir and domestic tensions. Insofar as Iran has in the past offered India a strategic counterweight and transshipment alternative to a hostile Pakistan, can India weather these strains?
I think our relationship with world over has weathered many strains. It's based on what is mutual interest and larger interest of the world. So I think even the utilization of the particular passage which we have mentioned, that has more broader outreach. Iran is, that particular aspect is playing an important role in Afghanistan. So there are a number of these things. And remember, the people-to-people relationship have always triumphed. And this relationship is ancient, just like our relationship with Israel is very ancient. So I'm sure, there's no doubt, challenges will keep coming, but I'm sure the leadership will take a very wise approach and we will be able to overcome all the challenges which come. I think our relationship is warm all across, and this particular medical emergency, we all need to work together, and whatever assistance we can provide to Iran in terms of medicines, in terms of diagnostics, just like the United States is also coming forward. So we are hopeful that together we can roll back this pandemic. And then once normalcy is established, we can continue our relationship with all the countries, including United States and Israel, which are very warm and deep.
Thank you. Daniel, is there another question?
Sure. And this is our final question before Jason, I'll turn it back over to you. This is from Stan in Chicago, who asked, are there any nations in particular who have been true friends to India during this time of crisis in terms of aid or support?
I think, again, I would emphasize that my leadership has assumed the leadership role in this very, very deadly crisis. We took not only proactive measures in India, but we also took proactive measures in the region and the world at large. And in this, a number of countries which needed help, we have come across. And it has also shown to us some of our friends who continue to collaborate very closely. And in these two, I would be very happy to mention United States and Israel. Not only we are collaborating in number of other issues, whatever human problems that have arisen, we have tried to help each other out, but also, as I underlined, in medical research, in medicine, we are working very closely together. Every day there are stories of our companies coming together, of ICMR and CDC and NIH working together, similarly with the Israeli organizations. So we are very heartened by this fact, and we are hopeful that together we can all come and fight this pandemic and push it back.
Ambassador, I must say, you've encapsulated in just a few words the spirit that I was really hoping to convey myself. A partnership that exists between India and the United States, the partnership that exists between India and Israel, really a trilateral relationship of sister democracies. The AJC has been, as you know, a very active advocate and supporter of that trilateral partnership for many years. We continue to do so, working closely with Indian American friends and with you, Ambassador, and your predecessors and your colleagues. Thank you for taking the time to be with AJC today, talk about this relationship, to talk about how India is coping with the pandemic, and to again reaffirm this very strong partnership and friendship between India and the Jewish people, India and Israel, India and the United States. Ambassador, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you to all your members and friends. I just want to once again reiterate that this is a time of positivity, and all our three countries bring together their strengths. And India itself, do keep in mind that we are leading the fight. There are 1.3 billion people. we have managed to contain this. And in that, my leadership looks forward to all the positive support which all your members and all the well-wishers can bring. Thank you very much, and we look forward to our continued interaction.
Thank you, Ambassador Sandhu. Daniel?
Thank you, Jason, and thank you very much, Ambassador. I also want to thank our audience for joining us today. To support AJC's vital work around the world, please visit ajc.org/donate. Please stay safe and healthy, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.